Michael Smith. I am the pastor of the Church of. This is the Church of, and here is your message for the week of October 6th. Let's get our notes and let's get going here. So we're talking about taking stock of the relationships in our lives. I guess I might as well go back to the whiteboard here. Along the priority axis and the integration axis, and how we find that the treasure and richness of our lives is dotted across the relational richness of our lives, dotted across the spectrum, across the landscape, and that we have relationships of varying levels of priority and integration, and some relationships are highly rich in both, right? And other relationships are rich on one dimension, but it is richness nonetheless. That none of our relationships are entirely everything, but in toto, right? In its entirety, all we are is what we are, right? All we have is what we have. A friend of mine, he's passed away a number of years ago, but he's a very dear man. He's gone to that next place, right? He's in the not yet, right? We're still in the right now. That there-ness of that extreme non-suffering, non-violence, that blessed place. But he used to always say, we were talking about the church stuff at the time, we were pastors, and he said, people always complain about their church. He said, pastors always tell me, I don't have the same administrators as you have, or I don't have the same music people as you have, or I don't have the same, volunteer quality or whatever it is. And he said, you have to build with the team that you have. He said, because I'd hate to see you try to build with a team you don't have. And that's such a profound thing that forces us out of criticizing or lamenting what is not, and stewarding and celebrating and activating our gratitude for what we do have. So when we talk about this relationship landscape, I don't want you to think, well, I wish I had a marriage like this. Marriages all look different. People say, I wish I was best friends like you guys are. I wish I had somebody in my life like that. And you can't really compare. No two situations are alike. No two people are alike. But if you take stock and you say, Lord, I have the relationships I do have. So my parents got divorced. I wish my parents were together. Well, there's the way things are, right? And the way things ought to be. And you have to deal with the way things are. And so as you take stock and you say, you know what, I'm going to celebrate the relational richness that I do have. And not even in a manipulative way, like if I'm just pretend I'm happy about what I have, God will give me more. Well, we moved on from that, right? We moved on from those elementary thinking, and we're just saying, okay, God, how have you manifested goodness in my life? Through whom are you manifesting that goodness in my life? God, don't let me be one of these people that the places that want me, I don't want, but I want the places that don't want me. God, help me. Just rest in the place of the who that is in my life for this when, the WHEN, the WHO for the WHEN that I'm in now. And so we're talking about past and present. I not only want you to think, I had heard from a member this past week said they wept through the whole message last Sunday's teaching, just looking at the history and the story of their lives, right? And the narrative story of their lives, past and present, how priority shifts up and down. And we rejoice. A lot of times we fail to rejoice. What is the old thing about you don't know how much you miss it till it's gone, right? The priority that we had with people that has shifted, or the integration that we had with people that has shifted, the ideological sharing that have, and they change, we change, life changes, season changes. So we have this relational richness landscape, what our snapshot looks like in the past. We have what it looks like in the present, and we must be aware that it will look new in the future. That if you look around and say, okay, these are my relationships, this is who I have, it's very interesting. I think sometimes we project, and this is kind of a strange thing that we do. Maybe it's safety this way, maybe we've been conditioned this way, but I always kind of was one of these people that, thought, well, the dad always passes away first, right? It'd be, the grandpa goes away first, not the grandma. And in Connie and I's life, both of our moms passed before our dads. And that's a very interesting dynamic. And you wouldn't think about it, I wouldn't have thought that way. And so as you think, well, I can project into the future, this is what the relational priority integration landscape of my life will look like. Well, we only really have what it was and what it is. We know that it shall be. We know there will be richness in what shall be, but we can't often extrapolate or draw out over time what that relationship will look like. So by faith, we're by kind of obligation, we're thankful for what's past. By obligation and honor, we're grateful for what's present. But we're also by faith trusting that whatever that priority and integration landscape looks like in the future, that there's also richness there to be observed with Christ-sightedness. And maybe, possibly, and this is again a faith thing, that maybe things that are past might be future again. And that's a difficult thing because sometimes we had seasons where a person was very high on our priority or very high on integration, and we can't really explain why it went left or why that has shifted. And sometimes we're longing for that to revive. It's very difficult sometimes when we're longing for it to revive, but the other is not share that same longing. So while we don't want to fixate on and miss what we have now, longing for what was, I do think it's okay to hold out hope. Maybe there could be a revival of that old again, but you don't want to be so stuck in the past that you don't cherish the present. You don't want to be so hopeful about a possible return that you overlook what God is providing moment by moment. And so this again is part of how we learn to steward. And we give special mindfulness. I just had this in my notes this week, and we're moving forward. Special mindfulness. With those to whom your connection is fully vested. This is an interesting idea, and I may not even be using the term right, but when I talk about being fully vested, that there is a level of priority and a level of integration, and sometimes that priority and integration trajectory is high, like it's just massively high, and it reaches a place where, because of these high levels, there is a vesting in the relationship. Sometimes marriage is this way. And you would say things, well, we're no longer married, but they are. That is the mother of my children. And what is that saying? There's a certain amount of vesting. Now, that's not always the truth, and it may not be the immediate truth. Man, I never care if I see her again, like Dan Marino, right? She should die of gonorrhea and rot in hell. I mean, but then what happens as time does what time does, as time works its sobering work within us, we say, well, there's a vesting there. Or, sometimes we have friends. It's very interesting. Sometimes we'll have situations where, we've shared high richness and priority and integration for a while, but then there's a shift, which is that our lives are not as integrated as they used to be. Right? We're not even connecting that much, but they still always and forever maintain that priority. And that's not always the case. But there are cases when somebody is vested, which is what? Even if the integration retired today, even if the functional and the ideological cease today, there is enough equity in the relationship that they will always and forever hold that place. Because it's an equity that cannot be depleted, right? It is perpetuitous in nature. It is in perpetuity. They will always be who they always are, even though we are not, they are who they are, even though in my heart and in my life and in my family, even though we are not who we used to be as an integrated and functional relationship. Okay. Moving on. So the concept of bigger and biggering. We talked about this with Paul and Barnabas. That Barnabas was drawn to Paul's bigger view, that he could see it bigger, and Barnabas was attracted to that ideological view, and they meshed on it. But the trouble was, Paul's ideas were not only bigger than what was going on, they were not yet done biggerizing, right? They were biggering, and that as they climbed up the ladder of integration, the ideological strain became too much. The poor soul was too high strung, and they had a falling out. And so this idea of something big and getting big can cut both ways. The evolution of our thinking, the evolution of us as an individual can be unifying, or it can be divisive. I go back to where we started in Luke 14. It says, those that follow me, but they don't hate their mother, hate their father, hate their brother, or love me more than everybody else, they can't come with me. And of course, that's a weaponized twisting of the Spirit of Christ that has been used for awful purposes. But it is true that sometimes our growth can only be accommodated to a point. It's great when religious enlightenment, religious things, or any form of enlightenment, I guess, makes a person more gracious, makes a person more accepting, makes a person more accommodating and more engaged. That's beautiful. If you've had a meditation, or maybe you've had you went and licked the toad, right? You had the experience, and you saw Zeus and Moses and Tupac, and they were all gathered together playing, Switch, and it was a transformative experience. That experience is powerful if you return from that DMT with more accepting, more gracious, more accommodating, more engaged. But these types of enlightenment, right? They can turn divisive. When the definitions of those things are different. Sometimes we think, well, I am more engaged, I am more enlightened, I am more connected with the truth, and that connection with the truth makes me unable to accommodate or abide other people, or that where I become unaccommodatable and unabidable, because every time I look, you got your kids going to Santa Claus, why don't you just call it Satan Claus? You're taking them away from Jesus. And somebody said, what happened to you? I had an awesome experience, and that awesome experience was great when it got you off drugs. That religious experience was great when Grandpa stopped drinking. There was a glorious experience when you changed whatever lifestyle you were in. Man, that's great, and it's bigger. Man, we look at you. You're more engaged. You're more gracious. You're more accommodating. You're more connected. It's beautiful. But sometimes the bigger ring goes to, now all of a sudden you need to put that smoke down. You need a cigarette down. You need to do this. And why are you going there? And I wouldn't let my kid wear that. And now it's what was growth that made us more connected and real now becomes this, kind of pestilent intersocial kudzu, right? That we can't seem to cut back. And so what happens? Now the integration, now the priority shifts. And so it can cut both ways. When sometimes the enlightened experience, seems to consume the humanness of one party in a relationship. And again, these are competing definitions. And somebody say, well, you've changed, you pray all the time, and you want to read the Bible all the time, and you don't talk to anybody, and you can't wish them happy birthday, and you don't come to the family gatherings and say, it's consumed your humanness. And somebody said, it hasn't consumed my humanness, it's connected me with my humanness. So there's from different perspectives, how good of a thing it can be. And by religion, we're usually conditioned to not only accept, but expect this, that you got to expect that if you're going to go all the way for God, your light is, not going to be able to be accommodated by everybody's darkness. And that's a sad thing. It's a sad effect of weaponized religion. I think it should be the reverse. I think the more that we come into Christ, it should be that our accommodation, our patience, our understanding, our sightedness, our whole seeing gets so large that we can that our jaws open up wide enough, our arms open up wide enough to encompass everybody from all sorts of things. And what we should be running into, if anything, is people who are stunted and stumble at our largeness rather than at our narrowness. But in truth, it's the religiously converted that become narrow. And I think it may be that, I'll just tell you from experience, there's a lot of places I'm persona non grata. There's a lot of places I'm not welcome now. There's a lot of places that if they see me coming down the street, they shut the door and board up their windows and pull the closed sign down. And that's okay. But it's not because I don't want to sit there and talk about what all they have going on. And I may grieve, to say, gee, it's tough to see this weaponized religion consuming your life, consuming your soul, consuming your relationships. It's tough to see you living under this torment and fear of a Christless idea of God, a weaponized form of Christianity, a form of Christianity that makes God not only worse than Christ, but worse than anything that you would ever imagine doing to your own children. And I may be grieved for that, but I don't have to exclude you because you're going to put me in violation of my divine alignment. And that's the thing. The higher enlightenment we get, the larger we're walking with the eyes of the Creator, right? Walking as and working as the eyes of the Creator, seeing where everybody is in their journey, knowing there's a journey for everything, knowing that even as people are aiming right, even when they're aiming wrong, their hearts are aiming right while aiming wrong, and able to wrap our arms around that, to sit with the sinner in the street and the sinner in the tree and the disgusting sinner that's not touchable and the pure sinner that wouldn't touch anybody else. And Jesus shows us the ability to be with all of these people. And that is the work of true seeing. But sometimes we find ourselves consumed by a largeness that conflicts with people who are consumed by a narrowness. And how do we navigate that? This is all these ideas. And don't even talk about biggering when it comes to things like addiction, or when it comes to things like mental health, or career pursuits, or even health pursuits. Somebody gets totally radicalized in health, and now all of a sudden you say, what are you drinking, a beer? No. Are you drinking a cocktail? No, it's just water. What kind of water? Well, no, it's a seltzer water. Oh my God, seltzer water, that's destroying your bladder. You can't get that. Got to get that out of your house. And it in itself is a form of religion. Don't call it religion when I'm living forever and you're dead at 50 or whatever it is. And it's this fear, and this it's all rooted in fear and kind of this selective blocking out. I remember with my own Christianity, I kind of justified for a long time, well, look how much it protects me. Look at how many people are strung out on drugs, and look at how many people are divorced, and look how many people are that. And I could never, until I stepped out of it, right? I tell people, I've told you all, that I came to faith in Christ in October of 1988, but I didn't become a Christian until 2020. And the difference is I didn't come out of this. It was not till then that I stepped out of the weaponized idea of religion, and I lost a lot there. I gained a lot there, but I lost a lot there. But that's an entirely different conversation. I don't even know why I was talking about that. I lost it. I was talking about the water and the seltzer and the religion and the fear. But it all has to do with this thing of vertical alignment, right? When you get to the place where you say, I'm no longer obsessed with trying to make sure I'm aligned with God out of fear, then I no longer go through policing the world. Oh, I was talking about the protective aspect. So I thought, well, look at all the divorced people. Look at all the messed up marriages. Look at all the messed up children of all the people that are not in Christ, or at least not in Christ like I am. But then when I came to actual relationship with Christ, instead of this weaponized Christianity, I started to realize two things. Number one, there were a lot of people that were radically dedicated to God who ended up in those bad things. Secondly, there were a lot of people that had nothing to do with God who had very much relational and life richness that I had. And so you have to step out of it. And so with all of these weaponizings big and biggering when you're gracious, and that's where I think Paul was. Paul was biggering to the side of graciousness. And Barnabas was like, I'm there with you. But he couldn't go all the way. He couldn't just say that Gentiles didn't have to become Jews. He couldn't just say that God was not this weaponizing, legalistic God, and that it wasn't a lower rule for the Gentiles and a higher rule for the Jews. And Paul was like, it's ridiculous. It's the same God. It's the same law. It's the same everything. We got to stop projecting on Gentile people stuff which we know in our own Jewish lives meant nothing to us. And Barnabas was attracted to that to a point. But Paul was saying, I'm going to even make it bigger. And it kept getting bigger, and his arms kept getting bigger, and the view kept getting bigger. And we're supposed to be following Paul as Paul followed Christ into that enlarging. But Barnabas hit his sticking point and began to retreat and began to go backwards because there was safety overall in the group of people saying, Paul's gone a little bit too far. Look, we're all for the bigger, but you just can't keep biggering and biggering until there's no rules anymore. And you're not going to bigger and bigger until everybody's in. My God, there has to be a good us and a bad them. Paul's trying to make it sound like there's no bad them. We built our whole identity off the bad them and the good us, and therein was the challenge. So. And so even though these things feel pressure on us, sometimes in our relationships where the bigger and the biggering are in conflict, it requires us a fresh negotiation, sometimes a fresh reshaping. And we're going to get to that eventually as we talk about the compartmentalization. So are you there? Are you catching what I'm saying? Like somebody say you're painting real fine details. I'm trying to enlarge it so that whatever you're dealing with now, you have context, but as you go through life in the future, you'll have a context. So here, in low-level relationships, and we're shifting again, in low-level relationships, it's easy to recognize the entrance and exit of the players, right? We know coworkers come in and out. When you're a little kid, you think, these are my friends for life. And adults are like, maybe. We're going to be together forever. Me and my fourth grade friends that all came to my fourth grade party, man, by seventh grade, you're not even talking to half of those girls, right? In low-level relationships, low on the priority, even though they're highly integrated, they're low on the priority. a hierarchy. We just learn to see the entrance and exit, the ebb and flow, the warming and cooling of relationships. One of the things that I do with my kids is I just say, I take notice of who they talk about all the time and then who they don't talk about anymore. And kind of say, well, how was so-and-so? I haven't talked to them. Well, maybe you reach out to them. I don't know about that. And I'm not saying go be best friends with somebody who's not best friend. I understand some people ride on your train 3 or 4 stops and somebody gets on and somebody new gets on and you, gets off, gets on. You're chatting with a new person. They're riding for a while and I understand that that's how that works, but also, when you have high priority with a person, even though things cool, it doesn't have to be that I never talk to them anymore. I don't speak to them anymore. Well, every now and then you just check in. And what's interesting is, I found that in their lives, there are people that were, real close in my kids' lives. And then, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, they came out and then they popped up in 10th grade and then out of this. But now I find it's like, oh yeah, I heard from the other day, they're doing good. We caught up because we want to, as much as possible. We looked at it last week, as much as we are to try to at least have a functional, non-weird, hey, how you doing type thing. And that's what we're aiming for. But in low-level relationships, we're used to that. Well, you learn as an adult. People are around and people are not around. Whatever happened to so-and-so? Here's we grew apart, right? We have that. But the wickets get stickier, right? As you move up the priority ladder. In work relationships, right? We just accept, it's just going, and even a lot of friendships, a lot of associations, friendships, we just accept. Look, there's, seasons end. Friends fall out of our lives. They fall into our lives. You go that way. And we try our best in these low-level relationships to not cut, right? We try to, I saw a sign one time, don't cut what you can untie. And that really ministered to me. Okay, Lord, I don't want to just cut this off because we shared ideological integration and now it's gotten weird. I'm hanging out with them and they're saying all these racist, horrible things. Or, I had this great friend and man, we were friends in elementary school. We were friends in middle school, but in high school, man, they can turn into this real predatory person. Say, I can't ride with you ideologically anymore. But okay, Lord, help me untie this instead of cutting it, and so that's what you try to aim for in maturity. But we're also working towards being willing to allow the ending of a season. God, if the season is ending with this relationship, I thank you that you can calmly, peacefully let us each float away into our different lives. And maybe we're calmly and peacefully floating away. God, I don't want to cut and be dramatic, but if the river's taking them one way, we don't have to have a falling out. I don't have to cuss them out on their way out, kick them on their way out, dog them. I'm so glad they're not with us anymore. I don't have to do that, Lord, because if it's a temporary parting, I just thank you for the season we had. And if it comes back around, great. If it's a permanent parting, I thank you for the season we had. We try to do that with graciousness, right? But at minimum, we're always aware in our lives of the changing depths of relationships. I used to do fishing when I wore a younger man's clothes, and they would have the depth finder. They would show you, be in the river, and this would be 20 feet deep, this would be 40 feet deep, this would be 8 feet deep, and they show you. And so we know sometimes even though people are in our lives still, it's not to the same depth, and we're aware, and nobody's saying it, and sometimes we'll go to, well, what happened to us? I don't know, and that's tough. What happened to us? I don't know. You started acting weird. Sometimes you're able to recover that depth, or sometimes you just can't explain it, and that is the reality of relationships, of an intimacy that burns hotter and cooler over time. Are you guys friends? Yeah. Are you still connected? Yeah. We don't work together anymore. We're in a different department anymore, but they were at the party. We had a great time at the party. Oh, you guys should see each other. I don't know. You guys should go out. Why don't you get coffee? I don't know. What's wrong? It's inexplicable. That's what I'm trying to say. Sometimes relationships, the ebb and flow and the season and the heating and the cooling and the depth and it's part of the phenomenon of life. And you learn this, of course, over time, which because of this ebb and flow and the shifting, a true friendship that survives season by season, which they get rarer and rarer. You think, when you're in kindergarten, right, your birthday, the whole class comes, 23 cupcakes, right? In first grade, the whole class comes. Fourth grade, fifth grade, you're like, 6, 7. Middle school, it's like 4 or 5 people, and then you watch those are 4 or 5 A1 day ones, but by 8th grade, it's totally, by 10th grade, it's a totally different thing. But you'll find people that, man, they're still popping up, and those friendships, right, become very precious, right? Presidential cycle by presidential cycle. We ought not fear this. Where practical, we ought to fight to maintain relationships. And sometimes that means having the argument necessary to work through those issues. But we ought not fight the changing of the seasons. Fight to preserve relationships. Sometimes it means fighting through the issue to preserve it, but we ought not fight the changing of the seasons. And sometimes it's difficult to know how to accept, and this has happened. Is this one of those times where I just have to accept it? And sometimes we go at it once, we go at it twice, and we say, God, listen, if you're closing a door here, if you're untying a thing here, I always pray, God, anybody in my life that should not be in my life from this season, I thank you that you peacefully move them on. Anybody that I'm in their life that I shouldn't, I thank you that you peacefully move them on. That's a dangerous prayer to pray, because then you walk up and say, I haven't heard from Fred in 3 months. Well, you just prayed that, so anything. It's difficult to know when to accept that this has happened, right? But we should not be shocked. And here's a big thing I want to get. You should not be ashamed when a season does shift. It would have been great if Paul and Barnabas' split had been kind of just this floating away, but it kind of came to a head. And the King James says the contention was so sharp between them that they went asunder. It's a cutting. It was a cutting. It was so remarkable that whoever wrote the book, be it Luke or stewards, or it was passed on through a telephone game, the rumor of the fight, which means these two guys who were in a fight just by themselves, they went out and talked about it. You know what he said to me? He actually said it got out, right? The beef. It's the Gallagher's are, it's happened. But maybe they'll tour again. I consider the shame of Paul and Barnabas in that split. Not the shame that there was a split, but the shame of the split. Maybe in the immediate it was Paul, and Barnabas gets the liberty of saying, look, you know how radical it is. And Barnabas said, I tried. Look, I tried, and he kept pushing, and I tried. And I honestly thought he would recognize, I thought I would be vested in his life. My God, nobody believed him except for me. And I kept telling him, okay, slow down. And it was funny for a while, but then it's not funny anymore, because it's one thing to say, that maybe it's bigger than us, but I feel like he's trying to replace us. That's tough. And boy, there was no shortage of sympathetic ears to hear that thing. Well, James has been saying that for a long time. They're talking about barring him from his own churches because of the stuff that he says. What was that shame like to say? Paul and Barnabas had been sent out together. That's what's so crazy. The church signed off a letter. Hereby we send to you Paul and our brother Paul and our brother Barnabas. They're going to carry this letter to you and tell you that James has spoken and said non-Jewish people don't have to, get their tips clipped, right? So now imagine rolling into a church and Barnabas isn't there. It's Barnabas and it's Paul and Silas. Paul and Silas ride in, and they they're right out of Tombstone, right? The name's Saul of Tarsus, which you might call founder of the feast, right? So they ride in, and the church is like, they're all looking at it, and Paul hands them the letter, and they say, oh, from James. We know James. That's the Lord's brother. Yeah, he's head of the church in Jerusalem. Okay, and hereby we have sent Paul and Barnabas. Where's Barnabas? Oh, he didn't. Yeah, it's a thing. It was. I got Bart Silas though. It says Silas. Yeah, but where's Barnabas? Well, I think he had some family stuff. What do you say when everybody's looking at you? What did you do here, Paul? Right? Or Barnabas. Barnabas has no letter. Who is he now? Shocked. We don't want to be shocked. Shamed. We don't want to be shamed. I think of the honor that Paul has gotten in recent years. At the time, it didn't feel that way. When Paul was writing 2 Corinthians and saying, I can't believe you're barring me from my own church, you're saying I need another letter from James to even come into a church that I started to prove that I'm in line with the church. Does not your existence prove that I'm in line with the church? Look around. You all know each other because of the work that I did. And they said, look, we don't want to get in the middle of it. Just go back to James and get a second letter. But now Paul's got to go back to James and get a second letter. He already has a letter that says Barnabas and Saul, but he's going to come in there and say, I need a second letter, but can you change it to Silas? Paul's trying to, fake the handwriting and move it up and do that kind of thing. He's trying to do anything, and now I got to go to the second letter. But he's going to go to the second letter in a room where Barnabas is hanging out with the boss and say, yeah, can I get a second letter? Why? Because he's so difficult, da-da-da. And what is James going to say? Saul, Paul, maybe it's not Barnabas, son. Maybe it's you. It's not about how history views. It's not about who is the bigger or better person in it, but it's about how we in the present are ignorant of the true course of our lives. I told you, Proverbs 20:24, that our goings are of the Lord. How can we understand our own way? But now as you move up the ladder, we'll just move right along, footloose, fancy free. In other relationships, what about things like family? What about things like marriage? These are the family relationships, marriage relationships, other relationships. Those are things that in theory we could sever. Or in theory we could enter into an official or a de facto estrangement. Well, I'm just not around anymore. And this idea of estrangement, sadly, is in vogue in modern times. We've got such great prosperity here in America and in the West, largely. And I mean, the world is lifting little by little, more than half, technically middle class. There's a long way to go, but extreme poverty but as the prosperity comes, you get to have different types of luxury conversations. I mean, before, if you were out of the tribe and you just said, I don't need any of you all, and you left, it was a rough way to go. But now he's, I don't need any of you. I don't even need to speak to you all anymore. And there's lots of safety out there, lots of places to land, and that can be a good thing. But estrangement is definitely not new to Christian families or members of religious orders, where it's just being put out or being removed. Estrangement and shunning are actually part and parcel of the reformative and salvific process that we have to shun, we have to remove. We have to push you out of community in order to save your soul. Surely, I think maybe we've been the victim and villain in these type of situations that we've said you can't come anymore because you can't be part of the family dinner anymore because you're this or you're that, or you're married to this or that, or you're considering doing this or that, or you're no longer doing this or that. These are very painful things that have happened in my life, right? Painful parts of my life where we thought for religious good we should withhold connection or withdraw connection or to tolerate disconnection, withdrawing from, and you feel like, well, I had to withdraw because that's going to be necessary for the long-term salvation, or I was withdrawn from because that was necessary for my salvation, and that's a very difficult thing, especially when you've been on both sides of it. And I don't fault anybody because, I heard a very famous atheist say one time, he said, I don't have a problem when Christians come up to me and try to proselytize me. He said if there was a fire truck coming down the road at 100 miles an hour and I didn't see it, and I was standing in the middle of the street, and you were watching that fire truck coming and I was not paying attention, and you saw that fire truck almost getting ready to hit me, and you did not run out and say, get out of the way. He said, I don't think you love me. And he said, I disagree with the idea of hell, obviously, but that Christians would look at a person and say, God is going to burn you alive forever in eternity if you don't listen to what I'm saying. He said, I am not offended that they come up to me and tell me that, because they genuinely believe they're saving me. And so when we do this withdrawing or this shunning or whatever it was that we were done, and it's changed a lot over time, and it's not just religion. There's a lot of reasons why people withdraw and shun and things like that. It was almost always done because we were conditioned to believe that was the answer, that was true love, right? And then there's a lot to that. But some of these things, breakdowns, are for not the right reasons. And some of them are justifications are not even useful outside of spiritual applications. And sometimes people just go their separate ways. They just withdraw. Or sometimes we withdraw from people. My best friend, his mom used to say this, for some people, there's nothing better than a good old dose of let alone. And I like that. Some people just need to be left alone. Some people don't want to be bothered. Some people they're blaming the whole world for everything that happened. And sometimes you don't even need to chase people. And I've learned that, take all the spiritual application about it, because I've learned in church, out of church, some people just have fallen outs and they love people one day and they don't love people the other day. That's a fact of life. We try not to be part of that as much as we can avoid it, but sometimes we're caught up in it. We're either the one that says, you know what, and for this reason I'm out, or the other person says, I don't know where they went. And sometimes there's nothing better than a good old dose of let alone. Let people work out what they're working out, why they're working it out, and just know that, you know what, I tried. If it was on me, sorry. If it's on you, no problem. But we can't keep trying to reconcile something that we clearly need to recognize that this is going its separate way. But what about relationships where dissolution or estrangement is not practical? This is what we're trying to get to. What about situations where the cost of an impasse, when the cost of allowing an impasse to consume the entirety of the dynamic, when that cost is too great to bear? And that's a big thing now. I mean, I could say to Connie, or Connie could say to me, you know what, I'm just going to let you alone, do your thing. Well, unfortunately, the cost of allowing that is a huge cost. It's a cost to us. It's a cost to the children. It's a cost to our lives, or friendships, or family, or I don't get along with my parents. My parents don't get along with this. I don't get along with my brother. I don't get along with my sister. I don't get along with this. Well, what happens when we say, you know what, just let them float down the river, no big deal. But now the cost of that, allowing that impasse to consume, can be too high. How do I navigate it where I can't just let it float away? I've got to hold on to it, but holding on to it. Schopenhauer, right? Fine, I'm going to go out into the cold, dark night, but I don't want to be in the cold, dark night. I got to be huddled up. But when I get huddled up, I'm surrounded by porcupines, and I'm getting poked by all the porcupines. So I got to go back out in the cold, and then I come back in. And here's the thing that it takes us years to realize, that we say, I don't want to go out there because it's cold, but when I come here, you guys poke me with the porcupine quills. But guess what else? You're poking people with the porcupine quills too. And the question is there a middle ground? That's what I'm trying to get at. Is there a middle ground? Consider an interfaith marriage. Got just about 4 minutes. Consider an interfaith marriage. Is there a middle ground between, if you don't convert to my religion, we're out? Okay, so you're saying I gotta line up with something that I fundamentally don't believe, which is going to tear my soul in half, or that's option one. Or option two is I can stay what I believe and you leave me. Is there anything in between that? I'm not going to ask you to leave your religion, but please don't ask me to leave my religion. But if I'm saying, you say, well, I'm not leaving mine. Well, then we're out of here. Is there any in between that? The answer is there is. It's compartmentalization. What about a sexless marriage or a sexually unaligned marriage? Right? Is there a middle ground between these mismatched seasons of libido or disinterest or mental health or physical health or trauma health or whatever it is? And somebody says, well, I'm sorry, if you want to be here, then there's going to be absolutely no sex. Or I'm sorry, if you want to be here, you're going to have to change yourself to be. And if that's not going to be the case, then we're just done. Is there not a middle ground between those two extremes? Compartmentalization. Is there a middle ground between the devaluing misery of being in a sexless marriage you don't want, or a sexually unaligned marriage that you don't want? Is there a middle ground between that dissolution? Is there something that doesn't require a total sacrifice of our most intimate personhood in order to maintain it, which is what? I'm in a high priority relationship here. It requires a lot of high level integration. There's a lot on the line. It's not a friendship that I can just float down the river because there's going to be a huge cost to pay if we let this thing go. But is there some sort of middle ground between living in as not myself or living unfulfilled? Is there any form? And there is. It's called compartmentalization. And all relationships have to have it. As a matter of fact, the higher you go in priority, the higher you go in integration, the thinner the ideological and functional air gets. You're going to find little pockets that you have to seal off. Why? Because if we don't seal those little pockets off, we're going to crash, and we got to keep flying because there's a lot at stake. And so how do we seal off and section off? This is an idea. Even in our extended family, right? Our close family. See, I can't be out of the tribe. I can't just be like, I'm not going to see my grandmother anymore. I'm not going to any more family functions. Why? Because there are situations and topics and conversations and schisms, right? That are not safe for me emotionally. They're not safe for me practically. Well, is there a way to manage these things of, my option is to totally leave the family or to go and deal with things that are problematic? Is there a compartmentalized third option where I can lose the battle but yet still enjoy the warmth of the tribe? Compartmentalization. This is why, even though it's not always practical, the Christian scriptures advise striving to aim at and live peaceably for all men. And let me pause here. Let me close with this. I hope you're getting something out of what I'm saying. I feel like I'm just rambling, but I hope there's something rich here for you, because I can't see you. I can't. One day I'm going to take a picture and show you what this thing is like from my perspective. But let me acknowledge the shame of failure in this. Because I want to teach you how to practically compartmentalize on all those type of things. And I think maybe we may have to have a marriage session separately, so we can really, truly, freely talk. But I want to acknowledge the shame of failure at this. Some of us are of the biological, psychological, even pathological makeup that we can tolerate the cessation of a relationship better than others. Oh, yeah, what happened? I don't talk to them anymore. Really? Yeah, you guys are like best friends. Yeah, I don't know what they're doing. We don't check on them? Yeah, it's like the guy said in that movie, Patsy Cline. Waitress said, diner, she says, boy, Patsy Cline came on, she said, boy, I'd sure like to see her in concert one day. And guys, I'm pretty sure she died. She goes, "Oh, don't that make you sad?" He said, "I've had time to get over it." Right there, there's some people. Doesn't that make you sad? No, I mean, whatever. I don't know what they're doing. Some people have that makeup. Some people have that makeup because I guess they're just biologically hardwired to do it, or they've been through enough stuff that they're just used to it. And that can be, that can be a thing too. Why everybody leaves? No big deal. Well, it is a big deal, but people learn to survive, right? We develop survival skills. But others of us are bothered deeply when there's even a slight disruption in the force. Maybe that's personality. Maybe that's hardwiring. Maybe that's biological. Maybe that itself is an equal and opposite pathological reaction to the same similar trauma. We stay up all night. We've sent a text, and the text asks for something, and we put all the disclaimers. Not trying to bother you. Definitely no pressure. Hope this is please understand. It's okay to say no. Blah 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 blah. Da da da. I just wanted to invite you to my birthday party, but you don't have to come. Da da da. And we take ourselves through all these hoops, and then we check our text messages 100 times just to make sure, because we can't stand the fact that maybe we said something that might come across as the wrong way. I mean, that's just the way that some of us are for days and months, playing and repeating on repeat our failure, right? Failure to maintain, failure to say it right, failure, and this could be also a trauma response. So the hardness and shelling could be the trauma response. The over, trying to make it all right could be a trauma response, and the shame of not being able to maintain. And I think these in different areas are dealt out, these personality traits or these things severally to different individuals. But for the second group, right? There's a group of people that maybe by makeup, and I think it's mostly by makeup, right? Mostly by nature, that if anytime the relationship doesn't feel in perfect harmony and 100% feasible function, it's a total failure, and it's a gut wrenching experience of shame and despair. Connie and I are these opposite people. Connie is like, Mike, the guy cussed you out and told you he was going to kill your whole family. Why do you want to take his call to go have coffee because he's kind of depressed? Why are you going to do that? And she's like, do not ever mention the guy's name to me again. He said the most horrible things. He said he was going to sexually assault me. Why are you? Well, but he's just going through and he's on drugs and maybe we can help him out and blah, 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 blah. Well, how'd Connie get there? I don't know, pathological, biological, whatever. I'm the person that can never stop caring, and she's the one that self-preserves by stop caring. Somewhere in the middle, and I think we help each other. But I carry such a gut-wrenching sense of shame and despair that I wasn't able to reinvent. I wasn't able to come out of it. I wasn't able to play good cop or bad cop or nice cop or hug or all the things of Ecclesiastes. A time to hug, a time to not hug, a time to smile, a time to not smile. I tried to do everything I could, and the shame that I couldn't hold it together. And I need to accept that even in high priority, high integration function, that sometimes it just doesn't work out. It's the advice I give to my children, but sometimes that our advice is so hard to take. What can you do? You can pray, you can talk, try to talk, you can expect failure. But also, as you play the narrative in your head of your relationship narrative, which is essentially who we are, the stories we tell ourselves, make sure we also maintain this. This was what helped me. Make sure we also, that as you play the narrative and you hear the voices and the voices of the other and what they're thinking and what they're telling, as you hear that in your head, make sure you also remind yourself that you have a perspective on the story as well. You don't have to justify your whole life, right? A la Oppenheimer. You don't have to do that, but you do have to make room for the fuller story. Because you can't just edit a story down and edit a relationship down and say, I'm going to show you these highlights, and this is who Jimmy is, this is who Timmy is, this is who Tammy is, this is who Franny is. I'm showing you the highlights. Tammy and Franny and Timmy and Jimmy cannot be reduced to their cleverly edited, a trailer, right? You put the right music to it, you put the right this. It's a family thing, but you put the horror music to it, it seems like there's a stalker in the neighborhood. And you got to make sure in your brain that you say, okay, I see that this failed, but it didn't fail all in one fell scoop of my internal evil and hideousness. It did fail, but there was a lot going on, and there's a lot of context, and I have a side and a story of it too, that is not just the summary of the parts in the Wikipedia page that tell the whole thing, the cliff notes that tell the whole thing, but there's a broader perspective because I was alive in it, and there was a lot of blowing winds, and there was a lot of cross currents, and okay, this was said, and this did happen, and that, but it is not all that happened in a vacuum, and sometimes that helps to say, oh God, the shame that I feel because I wasn't able to maintain a marriage, or I wasn't able to maintain a wife, or I wasn't able to maintain a relationship with my kids, or I wasn't able to maintain a relationship with this long friend, the shame of it. And I'm not saying defend yourself, because we don't have to defend ourselves. We have to accept that sometimes things move on. But at the same time, make sure that if you're a person that's like, cut them off like karate, great. But if you're another person that says, I am not at peace in my present because of the things that have fallen on my past, just remind yourself that in hindsight, you can look at it a lot of ways. But in the moment, it wasn't just pure evil that was driving you or pure selfishness. There was a lot of other things that were happening. The things are not always narrow and black and white. They're not always the edited version. They're not always the highlight reel. They're not always the cleverly crafted internal narrative or external narrative. Things are not always binary. Sometimes they're brackish waters. Never fail to remind yourself, I have a side of the story too. That's not saying I'm right and that they're wrong, but simply saying that when you got to be able to tell yourself there's more to what happened than the summary of it on paper. There's more than what happened than how it gets repeated to a welcoming audience. There's other people that saw that can remind and say, yeah, no, you did. Yes, you did tell them you weren't going to help them with any money, but that was the 14th time. It's like my dog, my dog. My dog is always like, Dad just started yelling for no reason. Not for no reason. Not for no reason. You kept trying to climb on me, and you kept trying to take my food, and you kept trying to sit on my head, and I finally pushed you off. Then you yelped. Then everybody comes in, Dad, what did you do? And Dad just pushed me off the couch for no reason. Not for no reason. Not for no reason. I don't know what he tells people at doggy daycare. Yeah, my dad just starts yelling and stuff, and I don't even do anything. I'm not subject to Kenobi's version of events. There's another side to it. And it's not really about right and wrong. It's about a narrative. You try to be as gracious as you can. Somebody say, what are you looking at? I'm looking at if I start the next note. I think I'm going to stop there and just encourage you. Prophet Khalid Khaled, I guess. Life is Roblox, right? This is life that I'm telling you about. And it goes in teens, 20s, 50s, 60s, 80s, And that's why you have to take stock of the landscape as it is. You can grieve and mourn. We need to give ourselves time to grieve and mourn. But the shame of stuff we can't control. Yeah, but if I could go back and not say that, if I could go back and not cheat, if I could go back and suckle the, yeah, but we can't go back. You can maybe have a little bit of asterisk fine print hope that maybe something, God could breathe on something again and a relationship could revive, but you can't be stuck in the past or stuck in the hope of the future that you miss out on the landscape that you have now. And maybe the landscape that you have now gets the better you. I mean, that's really the beauty of it, because as you obsess over this stuff from 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, as you obsess over it, you say, my God, I'm not the same person that I was. Whoever they're mad at is saying, whoever's let them down, I'm not the same. And guess what? They've grown too. I close with David Bowie. David Bowie in his young, wild years had all sorts of pontifications on love and romantic love and the farcity of it. And now it's just all engineered and manufactured by society to take us away from real life and blah, blah, blah. Then he fell in love and he was married in a long time. And it was this whole thing. And they asked him, they say, basically used to say that the whole idea of romantic love was a farce and it was manufactured by, this corrupt society, blah, blah, blah. And I love David Bowie's response, and I'm paraphrasing. He said this, you know what? He said, I'm glad I've lived long enough to think differently about that. What a beautiful gift. How many areas you and me tomorrow? I mean, if we were in church, I was at church, let me see those hands. How many of you can say this morning, I'm glad I lived long enough to think differently about that thing? Guess what? The people who have fallen out of your life, they've lived long enough to think differently too. And your rivers may not pass again, but guess what? We wish them well. I don't think they wish me well. We wish them all the happiness and all the fullness that they could possibly have. And my God, we don't want to be an asterisk or a footnote of present day pressure in their lives from something that happened a long time ago. Who they're mad at, we're not anymore. Who we're upset with or hurt by, they're not anymore. And I hope they're somewhere in the other world doing good. And let me tell you what else. No one crosses over to the other side with those unresolved conflicts. I never got to make up with mom before. Never got to make up with daddy before. I never got to say to my son before. I never got to. Once you cross over, these are here problems. On the other side, when the tapestry is revealed, man, God, how can we ever? It's all good. When at last we finally see, which is the first time we've ever seen, which is the first ability to fully see that Omega view, all this other human hitting and missing and porcupining, that all fades away. There's nobody on the other side going, well, I wish, my mom, when they told her, that the disease was, doing its thing. And she said, well, would I have another year? They said, ma'am, you don't even have, maybe have 6 weeks at most. And this is a very difficult thing. And she was in a lot of pain. And she said to me, she said, she said, well, my God's either going to heal me or I'm gone. And she said, I taught my children, she said, I try to teach you how to live with dignity, son. And if I'm out of here, I want to teach you how to die with dignity. And I said, okay. And she said, well, let me ask you this, son, is there anything you need to hear from me? And I thought, and I said, no, Mama, whatever we would go back over, it's not even a thing. And she says, is there anything you need to say to me? I said, just that you did for a little boy that you were everything. He had nothing else but you. You did right for that little boy. And we left it there. Because in the light of everything else, I mean, my God, what do you have? What do any of us have? But what we tried. I tell you what, none of us give our best when we're not our best. And a lot of life is prolonged seasons in different areas of us not being our best. Are any of us truly our best? Are any of us truly giving our best? Hopefully we're giving better. But life is roadblocks. Listen, thank you all so very much for your support. Just it means the world to us. All I say is, if you're finding value, I got to go way over here. If you're finding value, thank you for just letting us know. It means a lot, and also, of course, living that life, going out today. I was thinking about it last night. What can I do today, God? I used to hear, I think it was D.L. Moody that said he would not let his head hit the pillow until he had won a soul to Christ, that he had led someone to Christ. And there were stories of him after preaching all day, he would get in the bed in the hotel and lay down and sit up and, oh my gosh, I didn't lead somebody. And he would run out into the streets, just find somebody in the street and say, excuse me, do you know where you'll go to heaven? Do you know where you go when you die? And I thought, obviously that's something that I don't believe in. That's something that's the whole concept of that, as we know, and there's kind of an antichrist idea. But I do think the idea of me not hitting the bed, my pillow hitting the bed before I've done something to ease suffering somewhere in the world. Did I do anything today that would lift a burden, that would ease suffering, that would bring dignity? I like that compulsion. Oh man, did I help feed anybody today? Did I help clothe anybody today? Did I respond compassionately today? I think that's a much higher way to incorporate our view of Christ than to. But anyway, so that's that. God bless you. I love you. Peace, health, protection, preservation, soundness, abundance, aboveness, deliverance, grace, grace, love, love, light. In Jesus' name. Thank God for you. I'll see you next week. Listen, I'll see many of you this Saturday. It's going to be glorious. Make it great. You are loved. In Jesus' name.